I want to watch this Willy video. Okay, this is Willy's new video. For real, how far will Classic WoW go? Let's see.
So BlizzCon's happened, and as
Turn
many
up
of
the
us
audio a little
expected, turns out that Classic WoW will be going beyond Wrath of the Lich King. The first 3 expansions in Vanilla, TBC and Wrath were kind of a given that they would rerun their course, and whether that was for nostalgia's sake at first, revisiting raiding you missed back in the day, seeing how the classes were back then, whatever it was, they've all had their merits, and at times showed why certain things ended up changing too. Blizzard have also seen this moment coming for a while now, as have many of us. Cataclysm is a...
It seems like... I actually have the tab open right here. It seems like ICC is dropping off hard. And frankly, I did not expect this would be the case. I thought ICC was going to do way better than this. People are sick of ICC. By the way, this here is ICC. Okay, everything to the right of this. It is tanking. Is Kata gonna save this? In fact, actually, right now, this is the lowest that Wrath has ever been. This is the lowest Wrath has ever been. Is right now. People are burned down on Wrath, I guess.
Big changing points for Classic, and for those wanting to continue reliving more Classic experiences, there is Era, Hardcore, and most recently, Season of Discovery. The choices have never been larger for somebody to find a version of Classic WoW they like, and I think this push for vanilla content over the last 6 or so months has not been any coincidence. But Wrath is soon to be wrapping up, and the future of the Classic expansions are only heading forwards. So how far do you think they're going to go? Like, realistically though. I mean, even back in 2019, people were already...
I think they will go as long as they can keep making money. And here's the deal. With every future Classic WoW expansion, even though fewer people will be playing, that's my suspicion at least, I think that every future Classic WoW expansion is better able to make them more money, right? Like it's easier for Blizzard to make money from Classic Kata than it is from Classic Vanilla, because in Classic Kata they can get away with selling pets and transmogs and toys and mounts, and the WoW token is in the game, and so yeah, fewer people are playing, but the people that are playing are more willing to spend money than your vanilla WoW player base is.
Joking that I can't wait for BFA Classic, or then Shadowlands Classic, or now Dragonflight Classic. Personally, I'm looking forward to the World Soul Saga Classic, but memes aside, Classic is catching up with retail, there is no doubt about that. Whereas Vanilla to Kata originally took about 6 years between 2004 and 10, Classic has covered that same ground in 4 and probably a half years from 2019 to 2024. Depending when Kata actually comes out, that is. The difference maker has been, nearly without exception, the duration of the final content phase of each expansion. From Wrath and beyond, final patches often went on for 9 to 12 months, sometimes over 1 year, looking at Mists of Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor there. And whilst final raid tiers are the culmination of the expansion with all the overpowered gear and us fighting...
I remember Season 8, this is ICC patch, lasting about a year also. The final patch of Wrath. That lasted a really long time.
The big end boss. Given the choice, these days the Blizz devs aren't going to have us sitting on one patch for an entire year, or for anywhere near that long, ever. Unless it's Classic Era, I guess, but that's its own separate thing. I mean, take Ulduar, for example. It was one of the most hyped up and beloved raid tiers ever for Classic. And for many of us, it ended up feeling as though it went on for too long, and that came out on January 19th, and Trial of the Grand Crusader was June 22nd. And that 6-month time period does feel about as long as any major content.
I think Classic players don't want hard content. Classic players want social content. And the harder the content is, I think sort of necessarily the less social it is, because the more, if the content is harder, you're more uptight, you're kind of stressing out, you're super worried about your parses, and if one person makes a mistake, your parse is over, or the run is over. And I just think Vanilla WoW is that. Vanilla WoW really hammers home on that iconic, social, mass scale MMORPG experience in a way that TBC, Wrath. Nothing else does. Also, Vanilla WoW has the world. The world content in TBC or Wrath is 1% of what it is in Vanilla WoW.
Patch can really go on for. And I think a big part of the content being faster paced is just that on average, people get through stuff much faster. It's a side effect of it being a re-release. You know what's coming, what to prepare, what the hard fights will be, which classes are going to go well, all of that stuff. Back in the day, they had class balancing, a lot more fixes or updates to broken content, and so on. People would have been playing a lot more and re-rolling a lot more too. The phrase flavor of the month re-roll really came into prominence during Wrath, and for a good reason. Also, I think a ton more people PvP back in the day as well, which is inherently a very replayable thing to do and doesn't require this constant.
Seems like Classic Wrath PvP is also kind of dead. Seems like and the reason I say that, I don't ever hear anyone talking about it. I don't see any really huge PvP streams on Twitch. I don't see a lot of really popular Classic Wrath PvP content on YouTube. None of the people that I talk to talk about it or care about it. Maybe I'm just not in the right social circles, but it's weird because Classic TBC Arena it feels like way more popular. It feels like Classic TBC PvP was way more popular than Classic Wrath PvP.
Stream of new content.
I'm not sure why, because I think Wrath PvP is better.
Does. But anyway, we are, without a doubt, catching up. So how far does this journey go? Because we can never fully catch up, can we? Diversive as Cataclysm is compared to the original trio, it's still World of Warcraft. This is probably one of the most consistent gaming franchises of all time. People have been saying WoW's dead or the next WoW killer is around the corner for years, and it just keeps on going. After all, what do you think would keep more people playing? Moving on to the next expansion, transferring characters across and carrying on with whatever expansion that may be, or Blizzard to come out and say, so yeah, go play one of the classic versions of the game, or I don't know, raid ICC forever, I guess. The people who prefer vanilla already have choices, and as popular as Wrath of the Lich King raiding is, I don't think that many people are going to be sticking around forever in ICC. So will a Dragonflight...
Which is weird. I had totally expected the opposite. I thought that there would have been a big push for Classic Wrath era. And the reason why is that if you look at the private server scene for the last 10 years, always the largest private servers have been ICC patch Wrath of the Lich King private servers. And the exception is like Nostalrius. Nostalrius was the exception to that, but the private server scene has always been totally dominated by ICC, pretty much. ICC patch Wrath of the Lich King. But it seems like within the classic WoW scene, no one gives a shit about that.
Classic memes be true one day. In a few years' time, will there be posts and videos saying, you know what, Warlords of Draenor really wasn't that bad? Maybe there will, you know. And I'm going to go ahead and say something which I think makes sense, but I'm still not quite sure I fully believe it yet. And that is, I can see Classic going as far as Legion, as each expansion up to that point has enough merit to where enough players would want to re-see the content, and it would be worthwhile for Blizzard to do. But let's go into it in a bit more detail for each expansion.
Well, okay, if there's a desire for Classic Legion, you have to do Classic MOP and Classic WAD. Classic Warlords of Draenor. Awesome. That's awesome.
So, why will they be worthwhile? And that means starting with Cataclysm.
By the way, I will quickly note, one of the reasons why Nostalrius, the legendary Vanilla WoW private server in 2015-2016, was so incredibly popular was because people were so sick of WoD. Seeing how bad WoD was really made a lot of people say, I'm out of here. I'm not playing retail anymore. It's gotten too bad. I'm going to look for something else. And so many Nostalrius players were WoD refugees that were quitting retail and looking for something else. Seriously.
First up, it's going to be getting a few more features from later on in the game, such as an updated auction house, as well as the retail transmog system. Those are the two we've heard about so far. Kata will also trend towards more difficult PvE content. It's a middle ground where you don't just want the bosses to fall over, but you also don't want to be progressing for 2 or 3 months. It will offer an environment where 10-player raiding guilds can exist and get the same levels of loot as 25. There will be more challenging 5-man content too, and the whole Titan Rune dungeon system will be in Kata as well. The LFD will also now be a core part of...
I'm going to say something that is going to make me look like a casual. I don't care. Saying something is challenging content, that does nothing for me. Challenging content does not equal fun content. Challenging does not equal fun. So if the selling point of this new thing is that it's challenging, I don't care. Is it fun or is it not? It might be fun. It might not be fun. You can look at retail, Mythic Plus rating or high-level Mythic Plus keys when you're doing Mythic Plus dungeons in retail. Those are incredibly challenging, much more challenging than anything we've ever had in Classic Vanilla or Classic WoW. Much more challenging. Does it make it fun? For a lot of us, we would say no. But most certainly it is more challenging.
Of the game. There will be rated battlegrounds for PvP enjoyers. I keep hearing that Kata and Mists of Pandaria were good if you mainly played WoW for PvP. And I mean, there's got to be a few people out there who prefer the updated world post-shattering and the new quest lines and stories. But I do also believe that Cataclysm will be a bit of a stepping stone for Mists of Pandaria, sort of how people called TBC that for Wrath of the Lich King, because as memed on as MoP was back in the day, it really does have a lot of strong positives. So what will people play Mists of Pandaria for? Monk, of course, brand new class. If you're a Monk main, do you want to go back and see how that started off? If I was, I would. There's class tuning, big reworks compared to Cataclysm.
No.
The talent tree's revamped again, and now we have 1 talent point per 15 levels, which are often modified depending on your spec. Also, a lot of class abilities and passives are specific to choosing a talent tree now. For example, if you want Fireball, you have to be a Fire Mage. There was definitely a lot less choice in how you built your class and spec in Mists of Pandaria, but Blizzard essentially knew exactly what options you had, and because of this, they put a ton of power into every class. There was just something about Mists of Pandaria class design which felt as though everyone was overpowered, and it just kinda worked. Also, there was Vengeance tanking. This was probably the best expansion there has ever been to main a tank. So Vengeance in short means when you take damage, you deal more damage. And it was a way for tanks to keep up on DPS and of course threat generation. Now this mechanic existed in Cataclysm too, but in Kata, it's pretty tame, and the maximum attack power was capped at 10% of your health. And you know what they did in Mists of Pandaria? They made Vengeance a bit harder to stack, but they removed the cap, and tanks went absolutely crazy on DPS. It was not uncommon for your tank to be top DPS on certain encounters. In fact, tanks would actively try to take more damage between their own cooldowns and externals to stack Vengeance as much as possible. Blizzard got rid of Vengeance and replaced it with Resolve and Warlords of Draenor. So Mists of Pandaria is the only expansion where tanks can realistically be your top damage dealer. And I think that's pretty exciting.
Should tanks be at the top of damage meters? Does that make sense? I would say no.
And then there's raiding, Throne of Thunder and Siege of Orgrimmar especially. Mists of Pandaria had some great raids that I already know I'd definitely give a go again. I did quite a bit of Siege of Orgrimmar back in the day, but I didn't get the chance to see too much of Throne of Thunder, and people rate both of these raids very highly. There were challenge modes too. These were kind of the early adopter for Mythic Plus, but they were very different from it. Challenge mode set your gear to a certain level, and depending how fast you completed the dungeon, you got different rewards, such as a really good looking transmog set. Again, there was PvP as mentioned earlier. I keep hearing good things about Mists of Pandaria PvP, so I thought I'd bring it up here. There's also a big push for collection enjoyers in Mists of Pandaria. There are so many things to gather out in the world. There's battle pets. I don't know,
I just don't care about anything that is being talked about. I know this is like, we're doing like the highlight reel thing. We're talking about how great it was. I just don't give one shit about any single thing that is being mentioned about how great MoP was. I just want vanilla. Just vanilla. And you know, we can talk about making some changes, Season of Discovery, Classic Plus, let's talk about it. But MoP, I don't think so. That's going to be a no-go. That's going to be a No for
Kind
me.
of liked it when it was out. Back in Mists of Pandaria, I came up with a strategy to use 2 pets and then level another on all the epic and legendary pet fights, and then I'd sell the ones I got to level 25 afterwards. That was the main way I made gold back then. There was the Brawlers Guild, which had some challenging fights at the higher ranks, and when you didn't overgear them, those 2-minute enrage
Super
timers weren't
Hexagon.
easy. The Timeless Isle. For me, Timeless Isle is the iconic zone.
Timeless Isle is one of the best pieces of content ever made. I know I just shit on Mop for a second. Timeless Isle was so goddamn good. It was so good.
With just the loads of stuff to do.
It was
and
good.
It worked so well, they kept doing it in future expansions. We had Tanan Jungle in Warlords of Draenor, I guess Broken Shore or Soromar for Legion, Nazjatar and Mechagon for BFA, and so on. There's going to be a bunch more too, but those are the things off the top of my head that came to mind for Mists of Pandaria. But we all know what happens after Mists of Pandaria. And this one will be the hardest stepping stone to get over, in my opinion. And it's going to get memed on so hard if it's announced one way or the other. Warlords of Draenor Classic. Imagine that. Looking back now, it's honestly comical how little content this expansion had. It released on October 14th, 2014, and Tanan Jungle, that's basically the final major content patch, came out on the 23rd of June 2015. There were 2 major patches in total, and 3 raids. I mean, what's not to like if there's so little content? For real though, I do think people will say that this expansion wasn't so bad in a few years' time.
WoD, I have to say, is when the World of Warcraft story just got complete pants on head, moronically stupid. You can like reasonably understand and follow along with the World of Warcraft story and lore up until WoD. The second it's like, and then you go back in time in a different dimension, and very coincidentally, none of the characters that would have met themselves, they randomly don't meet themselves, because then you'd have really big plot and thematic problems. It just is like whoever wrote this story, the WoD story, whoever came up with this is just a goddamn moron.
And there are things to like, such as the speed of leveling through Warlords of Draenor. It was super fast to get characters to level cap because of just the XP given in zones and bonus objectives. Even years later when I was leveling a character...
Wait a minute. I'll come back to this later.
Objectives. Even years later when I was leveling a character, I'd get them through Gorgrond in an afternoon and be done with the expansion. And you can't say Warlords of Draenor didn't have some absolutely brilliant raids. Highmore was okay, wasn't my favourite, but Blackrock Foundry and Hellfire Citadel were both very well looked back on. Classes got big overhauls again in Warlords of Draenor. This is the expansion when the big pruning happened. Gear also swapped main stats if you respect too. Well, your armor did anyway. Also, multi-strike was the thing for this expansion. I have to say I didn't mind garrisons at first, to be honest. When you're actually doing stuff to complete the buildings, filling out your stables and so on, it was okay. But like much of Warlords of Draenor, once you got over that initial bit of content, there really wasn't much else to do. And should Warlords of Draenor happen again, it would be a brief revisit to Alternate Outland. That final patch they had was well over a year in duration, and it did not have much content.
I'm trying to think of exactly when they started doing this, but they have most certainly started now. This is when the game got very, like, visually soft. It got very visually Disney. The game just looks squishy. Does that make sense? It looks like you're in an inflatable bounce house for kids or something.
To start with, so there just really isn't much to re-release. And in case you're thinking, no, I highly doubt Blizzard would try and put back in some of the cancelled content, such as the missing Netherstorm zone for one, which was supposed to be named Farallon. And to be honest, I don't think it would be worth doing for them. It would kinda have to come with new content, including a raid. And is Warlords of Draenor Classic going to be the most popular version of Classic? You can already guess the answer to that. But at the end of the day, what is something they'd probably kinda feel obliged to do to get to the next expansion? Legion. Legion, with changes to some of its known issues, could be a very fun re-release, you know. Things to address include legendary drop rates and bad luck early game. Some people got their bis, some people got...
Dude, you know one of the honestly most badass things they could do? They could say, guys, we're going to do Classic MOP. We know a lot of you guys like MOP. I don't, but I think a lot of people do like MOP. We are going to go right from Classic MOP. We're going to skip Classic WoD, and we're going right to Legion. We understand with WoD, we really missed the ball, and we're skipping right to Legion. Let's go.
Got Cephas's secret.
I think a lot of people would like that.
Cephas was not good on launch. It got buffed later in the expansion, but launch Cephas, you did not want that. The artifact weapons pretty much locked you into one spec due to the artifact power grind. Never mind being alt unfriendly, Legion was respec unfriendly. That hasn't happened.
I think when people look back on Legion, they remember the second half, but they never think about the first half. The first half of Legion was really pretty bad. It was not good. It was really not good. The way that legendary weapons worked, there's no mage tower yet. Artifact weapons and legendary items. It was pretty bad. It felt pretty bad. The second half, they fixed a lot of those problems, but the first half was not good.
Happened before in WoW. As Mythic Plus was a new piece of content, there was the endless Maw of Souls, artifact power, and legendary chant spam. Artifact knowledge as a catch-up was good, but it probably could have come a bit earlier, especially on a re-release. And overall, if Blizzard did re-release Legion, and they were just a bit more generous overall with artifact power and legendaries, it could be a lot of fun. Possibly even have the resource to craft legendaries in from the first major content patch. Class order halls are a great and thematic addition to the game. I like them a lot, even if they did split the player base up to some extent. I mean, the alternative would have been just standing about in Dalaran, and we already kind of have done that in Wrath. Mythic Plus, of course, that was a new addition to the game, and it offered a different path for endgame players. It was repeatable content, infinitely scaling, suited 5-player groups, just something different than raiding, really. Suramar has to be the best open-world hostile city Blizzard have ever made, and the story went on through there.
I hated Suramar. I know I'm like the only person that has ever said that. I know that every single person, I know, we love Suramar. I thought Suramar was so goddamn annoying. It was so tedious. Like, doing anything in the zone was just annoying. I guess it was kind of flashy for the first couple of weeks, but man, it just got old so goddamn fast.
As we progressed in the expansion, we did big numbers in Legion, like damage numbers got completely insane. You'd be doing millions of DPS. Yeah, it was kind of dumb, but on the other hand, big number is kind of fun. The Mage Tower was a great single player challenge. It started off as a big flex, getting your hidden appearance early, and as the expansion went on, you could overgear them and get them a lot easier. Just overall an amazing bit of content to test yourself. A new class, can't forget about that one, Demon Hunter. We can see how they started off. There were also a lot of solid raids. The Emerald Nightmare was undertuned, especially on Mythic mode. Trial of Valor was a bit unexpected, but posed a greater challenge. Nighthold was probably my favourite of Legion. Then afterwards we had the Tomb of Soak Garrus, which went back to overtuned again.
I think the very first Race to World First raid that I really gave a shit about and followed along closely with was Race to World First Mythic Gul'dan. That's the first time I really followed along. But in anything before that, I was like, I knew it was happening. I knew the race was happening, but I didn't really care, right? This was the first race. Mythic Gul'dan was the first race that I was kind of a fan of, I guess you could say.
Before finally Antorus the Burning Throne. There were trinkets such as Whispers in the Dark, which gave you a crazy haste proc. Convergence of Fate would reset your class's cooldown super fast. Draft of Souls would just one-tap anyone in PvP with Battle Shout. All that good stuff. And it always felt as though there was something to do. There would be daily and weekly things to do, but we were kind of not as used to it yet, so it didn't feel as bad. All in all, Legion was a big turning point coming off the back of Warlords of Draenor, and Blizzard would try to carry on some of the trends which seemed to make it successful in the next 2 expansions, but they didn't turn out so well. I think going beyond Legion is going to be a hard sell, as beyond this, not only were the subsequent expansions less popular from a player point of view, but some of their core issues just kind of didn't go away. First was that feeling of losing all the...
BFA feels like it came out yesterday. and it was actually almost 6 years ago. God.
The power you just had in
Feels like
Legion.
yesterday.
Your DPS went from millions to about 10k or so at the start of BFA very early on. And it wasn't just
Getting
numbers
old.
being smaller. Abilities were gone. Artifact weapons were gone.
Dude, Island Expeditions and the Warfront scenarios. This is the expansion that was sort of touted out in front of us as being, this is the Horde versus Alliance expansion. Island Expeditions, Horde versus Alliance, competing over dynamic resources and dynamic spawns, and it's going to be epic. And it's not even PvP. There's no PvP, and you're fighting fucking AI, and they're the most repetitive, boring, cheesy instances of all time. And, oh yeah, Warfronts, by the way, there's no PvP. It's all, once again, you're fighting NPCs. And if you really enjoy that, you probably don't. But if you're the 1% of people that do really enjoy it, you can only do it once every week and a half. You can't even do it whenever you want. It's on a rotation. Sometimes you can do it. Other times you can't do it. So even if you do love it, guess what? You can't even do it half the time. It's going to be awesome. Cool.
Legendaries were disabled.
Cool.
BFA was an expansion in name, but it felt as though we all went backwards. There was more reliance on daily, weekly, and even monthly tasks to boost player engagement. And if you fell behind, you stayed behind. Azerite armor had less interesting bonuses as whole when compared to legendaries and artifact weapons. Wood essences.
And I remember carrying like 3 different sets of Azerite armor in my bags at all time, and then swapping the armor on and off depending on what I was doing. Like half of my bag space was Azerite gear. Cool.
Feel better if they were instantly account wide when they came out.
Cool.
And even later than that in BFA, do you want some random corruption BOE proc to count for more damage than all your class abilities put together? It just doesn't seem as though these systems are redeemable, even on a re-release. And then comes along Shadowlands with its covenants, its meaningful choices, and Blizzard's reluctance
Classic
to back down
Shadowlands.
their vision, and that didn't go so well either. And I think a back-to-back revisit of BFA and Shadowlands most certainly is not going to be it. As for Dragonflight, will it end up being seen as good enough to sit through these 2 expansions though? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that. The thing is, even if we do get to a point where there is Legion Classic, there are so many more questions to be asked. What happens to all the other versions of WoW we would have gone through? Is this just a one-time thing? Because right now it seems as though there's only demand for vanilla to be replayed on a large scale.
Yeah.
Will these servers reboot as progression servers? Will they go through expansions? Maybe players could vote for when an expansion drops. This is what EverQuest have done with their progression servers. What about the level-capped characters in this environment? Where do they go? Do they transfer to retail? Is there some kind of prestige system? Do we just force them to restart? At the end of the day, WoW kind of needs content to keep moving forwards. This is generally how MMOs work. Apart from Classic Era, it seems, but again, that's a bit of a special case. Equally, if things did get as far as Legion, by that point in time the game has changed enormously. At the moment with Wrath, some people are going back to vanilla due to the changes. More will for Kata, and things will keep going in that direction as we progress. Then again, a sub is a sub for Blizzard, and if enough people are playing to make it worth making, then it's going to make financial sense. They have said their surveys for Cataclysm actually turned out some pretty positive results when it came to people asking to carry on.
I do think that the version of Cataclysm we get when they release Classic Cata is going to be really, really different than Cataclysm as it was back in the day. I think they're going to make a lot of changes. I think they've probably been able to identify a lot of problems.
Forwards. We may not have seen those results ourselves, but then again, so many things have happened in Classic just because enough people have asked for it. Season of Discovery is also now underway, and I expect it to be very important in the future of Classic content in terms of what people do and do not like about this season. But if there's one thing that's been true for World of Warcraft for nearly 20 years now, it's that it just doesn't seem to go away. And I really don't expect Classic to either, in one way or another. Anyways, just thought that would be an interesting topic to cover today, because Classic is seemingly set on a path to go a lot further than many people would have imagined. But how much further? That remains to be seen. What do you reckon though? How far will Classic go? How many expansions would you want to revisit?
I think they're just going to keep going as long as they're making money. Seriously, I think it's that simple. which means I think they're going to go forever. I think they'll just keep on pumping out classic expansions. I don't think they're going to stop after Kata. I think they will do MOP, they'll do WoD, they'll do Legion. I think they will. Does that mean that I am going to play all of those versions? Absolutely not. But I think they'll keep doing them because they're in the business of making money, not making Stay Safe as an individual happy. If they were in the business of making me happy, then they would conduct their business very differently. But hey, that's the way it goes.
And what would your ideal future for the game be? Let me know below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in. And I'll see you on the next one very soon.
Very soon. All right, thank you, Willie. Great video. Great video.